We had some minor tech issues a minute ago. So good morning, everyone. I know we had a couple folks here in person, as well as Kathy just tuned in online with us. So thank you for attending this month's April Discovery Cafe with BAP Agency. We had to postpone from last month after the storms knocked out our internet down in Wellington area. So we are resuming this month with the Discovery Cafe on branding and what is your brand, what story are you telling? So thank you especially to BethAnn Parnell, who's the owner and creative director of the BAP Agency, for joining us for a second month in a row. We missed out last month and our internet was down. So thank you so much, BethAnn, for being here this morning and presenting for this month's Discovery Cafe. So if you want to, you can unmute yourself and take it away.
Can you hear me? All right, well, good morning. I am so glad to be here. I love people and I love to meet new people, of which I've gotten to do here in person this morning. I don't know if my love for people and meeting new people is a product of having to constantly meet new people, growing up in the military, or always moving, or if it was the opportunity that helped me grow my love of people. It's sort of a chicken or the egg situation. Anyway, I grew up traveling the world, literally, and I took it for granted. I tried all kinds of new foods and saw all kinds of famous works of art. I experienced being in and standing on the border of third world countries, living in Germany just before the wall came down, dividing East and West Germany. And one of the best examples of my experiences growing up, and a true testimony of how I took this world travel for granted, was one day when we were traveling as a family to Athens, Greece. It was hot. And as I was talking to Leah, who's riding with me down here this morning, I don't like the heat. I was hot. I was tired. And all I wanted to do was hang out at the hotel swimming pool. Well, the irony of that is I don't like water and I didn't swim. But I wanted to hang out at the swimming pool. And so as we start walking up Mars Hill, headed to the Parthenon in Athens, Greece, I said to my dad, can we just spend 30 minutes here? He proceeded to go on and on and on about how he brought us to this lifetime experience where we were about to walk the ancient roads and see famous sights. And since I had spent nearly 5 years in Europe at that point, seeing a lot of ruins, a lot of rocks, and walked a lot of ancient roads, I looked at him and I said, Dad, when you've seen one ruin, you've seen them all. Well, that story has been told in my family for years because my dad has never let me forget it. But in my mind, they all even the Parthenon seemed like a big pile of rocks. And as I look back on that event today with a little bit more maturity and experience, and having moved back to the States and realized that not everybody grew up with that experience, I realized it wasn't just a pile of rocks. It was at one time an elaborate temple of architectural genius. And many people approach its structure even today. I wonder, what if those rocks could talk? What stories would they tell? Even as I prepared for this presentation today, those rocks are still talking because I researched information on the Parthenon and what story it tells and what it was like in its glory days. So you may be asking yourself, if you're supposed to be here talking about branding, why in the world are you talking about rocks? Well, that's because those rocks were the foundation of a great building that has stood as a symbol in Athens, Greece, and even today they represent Greece and help tell its story. Many people think of a logo as a brand, but it really is just a part of the foundation or a visual representation of what a brand is. So let's think about it. What do you see and what happens in your mind and emotions when I say, okay, well, tell me again how I'm touch it and then there we go, got it. When I say Coca-Cola. So many people might sing a jingle. If you are as old as I am, you might see people running up a mountain, drinking a Coke, have a Coke and a smile. Sometimes you might see open a Coke, have open happiness. I may be the only person that goes to the Coca-Cola Museum to watch their advertising movie at the beginning and cry through it. But anyway, they're great at happiness and creating experiences. Or what if I say Reese's Pieces? If you're, again, old enough, you can see the E.T. finger as Elliot used Reese's Pieces to get E.T. to come up and meet with him. But it was about making a memory. It's about building a relationship. And if I say Chick-fil-A, how many of you immediately say, it's my pleasure? Our customer, or think of great customer service. These are all part of a brand. A brand is a story established and still being told about a person, place, or business. Your brand, a brand, is the total of who you are, of all of the experiences, impressions, and knowledge a person has about your product, service, or organization. It's not just your logo, it's so much more. So I think there are 3 really strong steps, 3 things you should do when building a brand story. You need to define your brand, develop your brand, and disseminate your brand. So let's start with, there's those 3 again, define, develop, and disseminate your brand. So let's start with define your brand. Who are you? What do you have to offer? What sets you apart and makes you unique? So more than a century ago, cattle ranchers used branding irons to indicate which animals were theirs. That's where we started to get the beginning of this brand concept. They had to mark their animals as theirs. Then with the rise of packaged goods in the 19th century, producers wanted to put their mark on a widening array of products. There were a lot of cough drops, a lot of flour products, sugar, beer, to indicate, they needed to indicate their source. They wanted their beer or their flour to stand apart from the next person's beer or flour. So in the late 1880s, a good example of this is Coca-Cola. Coca-Cola was getting started, and there were many soda producers at the same time in every market. Before Coca-Cola could get a customer to reach for a Coke, it needed to be sure the customer could distinguish their Coke from the other fizzy caramel colored beverages at the time. And so the idea of branding came about. Beginning in the later part of the 20th century, marketers began to grasp that there was more to the perception of distinctive products and services than just their name. So it started out with putting your brand, your name on something, but then it grew, and people realized there needed to be more about that to really make your product stand apart. Put simply, your brand is what your prospect thinks of when he or she hears your brand's name. It's everything the public thinks it knows about your name brand offering, both factual, both factual, like it comes in a robin's egg blue box. Most women are going to know immediately what this is, or emotional. It makes you feel romantic because I have a robin's egg blue box. Or your brand name exists objectively. People can see it. It's fixed. But your brand exists only in someone's mind. All right, so that's really important to know. It's not just the logo or just the image, but it's the whole experience that people have with your brand. So as you're defining your business and your brand, the sum total of who you are, you want to build brand integrity. What you present in print should also be what you show in sincerity in everything you do. There should be consistency throughout. You want to make sure that what people are experiencing with your brand is what they see with your brand. Otherwise, there is a trust factor lost. So to give you an example of where we're headed with defining a brand, we're going to start with my logo, with the BAP Agency logo. So our team has talked about this logo a lot. It was developed several years ago. We've talked about changing it, but we always come back to it for a reason. We're going to define the BAP brand by looking at this logo. You should see the text of the business name, but you should also see the icon of a quill pen, which is an instrument used to, quote, make your mark. That was what people would sign documents with when way back, and they may not know how to sign a name or whatever, and they would say sign, make a mark. If they couldn't read or write, make a mark. So there's the quill pen. It helps you to make your mark when signing a document or writing a story. As our logo shows you, and I hope your experience with our brand shows you, we want to work with businesses and organizations to help them build their brand stories of who they are and what they offer, so we can help them make their mark on the world. Each business is unique and has something to offer, and we want to make sure that we help them define that and make their mark in their business. So when we're working with a company to define their brand, we're going to ask questions like, what kind of personality do you have? Who is your ideal customer? What or who is your competition? How do you make your clients feel? How are you different? What makes your clients trust you? I believe that each person has a unique experience with their brand. And so if there are multiple hair salons in a town, there's room for more than one, because each one's going to cater to a different client. It's going to have a different niche, a different experience. So in my opinion, branding and advertising is about making your mark and setting you out as defining who that is, who you are, who your client is, and then really telling the story so that you connect the dots between the two. In this process, we're going to cover things like logo design, which we just talked about. We're also going to cover raster versus vector art. So many people today go into business, they have a logo created or they do something themselves without calling out any of the software online. People will go to these software sources online and they're like, I created a logo. Well, the reality is most of those are raster art, which means they're pixels, and we're going to look at that in a second. But vector art allows you to truly control the brand in any size and color scheme that you need available. So this slide just kind of explains that difference in raster and vector art, but truly to control your brand, you need vector art. Here's an example of what raster art looks like when blown up really big. You know, when you pull out on the left, it looks great. When you blow it up really big, it's very, very pixelated. As opposed to vector art, where no matter what size it is, massive or tiny, it's always going to be perfection. And so you always want to make, if you do not have a vector version of your logo, you need to have one created. And an agency like ours or someone else can help you do that. That is really important if you want to control the integrity of your brand. You want to make sure it looks the same every time it's out in print. In addition, you're going to want to make sure you have your colors lined out. So this is a sample of process color, where all your color is a mixture of cyan, magenta, yellow, and black, CMYK. Most printing sources, most presses are going to use this if you just send it like with a photograph or anything. But when you're building a brand, you really want to define it by its specific colors. Think the concept of a paint chip or swatch book. If you've heard the term PMS color, that's your Pantone matching system color. In the world of creative graphics, that is the plumb line. That is what you're going to line everything up against, is that color. Once you have that color number for your logo or color numbers for your logo, then you can hold that color across all medium. Everybody should be able to know how to match. You can match thread colors to that PMS color. You can match different fabrics and things, because that's kind of the plumb line, the defining point that you start with. So you want to make sure you have picked your colors through that PMS chart. And then you can have a CMYK conversion of those colors as well. So these are all things that we would be talking about when we're working with someone to define their brand. In addition, we're going to create or tweak a tagline, motto, or short descriptive phrase that quickly represents who you are. You need something, not just your brand name, but something that really tells people quickly who you are and what you do. For instance, with BAP Agency, we use helping you make your mark on the world. It just really quickly tells people that we're in the business of helping you build your brand. You also, this is a key point that you want to remember, you want to make sure you check URLs, social media platforms, and other things before you launch this brand to make sure, one, that you can, that somebody doesn't have it copyrighted or registered trademarked, and that you can get a domain name and a social media handle that's going to go with that brand before you ever really launch that brand. Otherwise, you're going to be backpedaling trying to fix those problems. All right, so let's look at a couple case studies. Again, about defining the brand. So I had a client years ago that came to me, and I knew her actually because my kids had actually taken some math classes from her. Sweet, kind, compassionate lady. She would help a student with a math problem for 24 hours if that's what it took to get this student to understand a math problem. She was just that kind of person. And she, over time, she found out what I did, and she came to me and she said, I'm ready to kind of launch this into a bigger business, and I've had somebody create a logo for me, and I'm just not real happy with it. And she said, it's not that it's a bad logo, I'm just not happy with it. And she said, I wonder if you would talk with me about it. And so she sent me what is the logo on the left. And it is very clean, it's very sleek, very modern. It's a great logo. But there was a disconnect because that sleek, clean, modern logo was not this warm and inviting brand image that this lady had, and that she was building all of her teachers. There's a massive teaching source. It didn't fit that. And so we talked about that, and I said, you know, it's a good brand, it's a good logo, you can do a lot with it. There was nothing negative. The designer was very talented, but she didn't feel like it represented her well. So we talked about what did represent her well. And the big kicker was she was teaching live math classes. Now, this is in the world of homeschoolers before we went through COVID and before it was common to do all these online classes. She was actually instructing elementary, middle school, high school students live in math classes online. And her passion, her heart was really to make math attainable to people. She really wanted kids to know that math was not this foreign object that you couldn't tackle, but everybody could be successful at math. And so we created this new logo for her. And visually, it has a lot of different components. You may like the modern, clean logo better. You may like the new logo better. But for her, the new logo represented that warm, inviting environment that she was. And the sine curve that you see as part of the logo, if you know math terms, actually shows the curve going down. And in her case, she wanted to take the anxiety out of math for her students. And so that is sort of the idea of your heart rate sort of settling. So it worked in a lot of ways. Another, let's see. Okay, so one of the things I also want to remind you is we're talking about business brands, but everyone has a personal brand. We're all individual people and we have a personal brand. And in some way, we're always marketing ourselves. So all of this stuff we're talking about can apply to you as a person as well as a business. Now, you may not go and build yourself a logo as a person, but you do have a resume and you do represent yourself in your clothing and in your dress and in your appearance and in how you talk. And so those things are all important to remember when representing yourself as well. So once we've defined the brand, we need to develop the brand. You're going to want to establish the story that your brand is telling. So with the brand defined, you need to think about, okay, what kind of experience do I want people to have with my brand? What do I want them to know? How do I want them to engage with me? What kind of client am I trying to reach? And so what story would I tell to reach all those people and connect all those dots? You want to invest in letterhead, business cards, signage, name tags, trade show displays, banners, tablecloths, anything that you need to truly represent who you are and what you do. Now, I realize anytime you're starting a business or if you're in a young business, it's hard to spend the money. But the rule of thumb with advertising is when you don't have the money, you need to spend the money. And when you do have the money, you may not need it as much, but you always need to be advertising and building your brand. So here's another case study we'll look at. Who represents your brand day in and day out? It's the people who work with you. How are they representing your brand? Are they kind to people? Are they caring? Are they dressed in a way that truly represents your brand? If you want them to be professional, are they dressed in professional clothes? If you want them to be more casual and more engaging, like if they work with children, are they dressed accordingly for that? So one of the things that people have come into a lot lately is corporate apparel. It used to be corporate apparel was very stiff and there wasn't a lot of options, but that has really grown and changed. And if you have a uniform or some type of corporate apparel guidance, it allows people to really kind of control their brand. And I don't mean control in a negative term. I mean to help really make sure your brand is consistent in the way people are interacting with it. So another case study that we'll look at is an educational message. Again, we're talking about how to develop your brand, how to tell the story of it. And I had a client come to me that did a lot of work in homes and in buildings, and they had this problem where people kept coming to them thinking they only did one thing, and yet they were very multifaceted in what they did. So we created some educational messaging and like a postcard size that talked about all the different components of who they are and what they did. And then either in person or through the mail, they could send out this multifaceted tool that changes and has all little different things. It was branded with their name on it. And we could send that out, and it gave somebody a visual handheld concept of the fact that they did more than one thing, and it helped really educate their clientele on their message and grow their business, because the two ways we can grow business are to get new clients or to get more business from the clients we have. And it's always easier to get more business from the clients you have than it is to grow new clients. In this case, it educated their current clients that they could do more for them, but it was an immediate introduction to new clients that they did all these different things. So it worked out well for them. We also want to make sure, oh, one other case study quickly. We had a hospice organization. Many of you in this area may be familiar with Shepherd's Cove Hospice. I've had a wonderful time working with them both as a vendor and as an employee. And we had a real hard time getting people to understand the full impact of what all Shepherd's Cove did in their services and in their community. And so we created some magazines there that we put out, and they shared the story of who we were and what we did in a magazine format. We also did some great creative relationship marketing. We created a Hope box, which is a custom box that was sent in the mail. And if you aren't aware, you can take the word hospice and make the word hope. And hospice is hope. And we use this box. They use it currently to send out with different ideas inside to share the message of who they are and what they do each month to different referral sources as well. So there are a lot of different creative ways you can educate your clients or your customer base. All right, let's not forget about experiential marketing when we're talking about ways to tell your story. So we've already mentioned Chick-fil-A a little bit. Most of the time when you go to Chick-fil-A, you have this great customer service experience, or you hope you do, because that's really what they're trying to market. Another one that we haven't talked about is M&Ms. How many of you remember the slogan, "They melt in your mouth and not in your hand"? Okay, well, how do you know if they melt in your mouth and not in your hand? You have to eat the M&Ms. You have to try them. It's an experience you have to give. And, oh, yeah, that really works. They melt in my mouth and not in my hands. So there's an experience that M&M created. Kit Kat. How many of you can sing, "Give me a break, give me a break"? You know, break me off a piece of that Kit Kat bar. And Kit Kat created this experience of when work is hard and when work is tough and you need a break, you get a Kit Kat because it gives you a break. So you want to make sure you think about those experiences you want people to have with your brand. Do you want it to be positive? You want it to be scary? Do you want it to be fun? What is your brand selling there? All right, so we've defined our brand. We're developing our brand. And then when most people think of branding and marketing, this is the number one they think of. They may not think of it in the word disseminate, because disseminate is kind of a big dictionary word, but I liked 3 Ds. So disseminate means to, let's define that. You've got to share your story. So dictionary.com defines disseminate as to scatter or spread it widely, as throwing seed, to broadcast it, to disperse it extensively. This is the traditional concept of advertising, but it needs to be engaging and powerful. Just because you spread the seed doesn't mean it's going to land on fertile soil. So you need to make sure that you're spreading your word, you're disseminating your brand in a way that it's reaching your target audience, that they're hearing it, and that they're going to want to experience that brand and engage with it. So I've worked with a lot of different media platforms over the years: radio, television, newspaper, magazine, trade show displays, training videos, public relations campaigns, promotional products, and more. There are so many ways to spread the word of who you are and what you do, that if you're not sure, reach out to people that are. They can help you. There are positives and negatives to all of them. Yesterday, Leah and I did a Facebook Live on our personal social media, or on our business social media, about is print dead? That's a conversation that people are really throwing around. Is print dead? No, it's not. It has its place. It's got pros and cons, just like digital marketing has pros and cons. You need to figure out which marketing component, which marketing avenue best fits where you're going to reach your target audience with the message that you want to convey. So let's look at some ideas of that and how you can do that creatively. So here's a case study. This was something that was easy for me to do because we have done it. But we used to send out a little white box. Anytime we met somebody new, we would send a white box. You open the box and there was a card in there that featured who we were, what we did, and had some testimonials from people. But inside that box was also this little tin, which is called Creative Ink, to be fun and creative. But inside it, if I can get the lid off, is a red glittery putty that people keep in their hands. When they're stressed, they work it in their hands. We wanted to take the stress out of marketing and advertising for people, so it was a great way to do that. And also in that box was a gel ink pen that people loved to write with, and it wrote smoothly. And so our message inside the box was, hey, it was great to meet you. We're excited to get to know you. Let us help you share your story smoothly without a lot of stress. You can call us for help. So that kind of was a creative way to do that. The next case study we'll look at was from a campaign I did many, many years ago, but it still is special to me. There was a bank in Warren, Arkansas that had been around for 100 years. Now they're pushing probably 120 now, 116, somewhere, anyway. But they had been around for 100 years. That is a big deal in today's marketplace. And so we got together and we created a year-long campaign called A Century of Service. And this little guy here, we did a retro theme before it was trendy to be retro. We did a retro theme. And this little guy here was the one that kind of announced the campaign. Hey, did you know we're in 100 years of service? We did great and fun things with this throughout the whole year. Newspaper, radio, we did some fun stuff like they had several of the employees that were veterans. And so we did a Guess the Veteran Employee picture. We had pictures of them when they were in the Air Force or the Army or whatever, when they were in their early 20s, and most of these men were in their 60s. And so people had a contest to guess which person it was in the bank. We did a children's savings campaign that was launched a lot of great things. And we had so much fun with it. We really engaged the community, and it did win some awards in the state of Arkansas and the Bank Marketing Association. So that was exciting to see that not only was it fun and did it help really build their brand, but it was recognized as something that worked from an advertising standpoint as well. So we want to be creative with a powerful message in an economical way. And that leads us to our third case study, which has happened very recently and is a lot of fun. So there is a product called Peace Tea. Peace Tea is a drink that is a bunch of different flavored teas. It comes in a very tall can. You can see the can sort of in that middle picture. But Peace Tea has, from the inception of their brand, has had kind of a hippie vibe theme. They have the peace symbol. They have these elaborate, just different colors. They have this grassroots mentality. And part of their brand concept is that they want to market their brand in a grassroots sort of way. So not a lot of traditional advertising. A lot of people aren't even aware that Peace Tea exists. And most people that are aware it exists are not aware that it is actually a division of Coca-Cola. It is a Coca-Cola product. Well, this gentleman on the left is a fan of Peace Tea. He's been a fan of Peace Tea for a while. And he actually would comment on Peace Tea's social media. He'd engage with them, just fun, friendly banter. And one day, he sort of as a dare, sort of as fun, he sent a DM to Peace Tea on Instagram and said, hey, Peace Tea, do you want to go to prom with me? And they left him on red, so he deleted the message and moved on. What he wasn't aware of was, because of his friendly banter and his engagement with Peace Tea for some time, he was kind of on their radar. They were watching kind of what he was posting because he was a big fan of theirs. And so when the message came in, will you go to prom with me? They laughed about it and chuckled about it. And then they said, we've got to do something. And so they started out reaching out to his family members, asking if they could get some help in getting some suit sizes, some measurements to create a custom suit. And that grew into an actual on-site promposal with a custom designed tux, designed by a famous tux designer and a master seamstress. And I won't go into all the details of the story, but it is elaborate. It's a great tux. And so we'll go to this next screen here. You can see the back of that tux. It's snazzy. Okay, I apologize. I was moving the cursor and I guess I muted myself. So Peace Tea decides that they're going to reveal their plan on their social media, on their Instagram. And then, as any good hippie brand or grassroots movement of the 60s does, they actually are going to hope, and it works, to spread that word through social media, and new tasters are born. And so I'm going to share with you a little bit. Did we decide that I could just click this and it would work? Let's hope. Sorry, trying to get that unmuted. Here we go. Oops. Sorry about that. Hold on just a second. Okay. So you can see how they then they did all of this. They created a video, and then they released that video on their social media, and people began to hear the story and share that video, and you ended up with this grassroots marketing campaign that they did spend money on because they invested a lot in this young man, but they also were able to just let it kind of spread the word through social media. So fun fact, this is actually my son. That we had no part in this. I did not know this was going on until PST reached out to me. My son had no idea it was going on. That video, he was totally shocked and surprised. That really was, it was just a fun thing to pull off. And if you want to know more about this story, because it's an elaborate story, feel free to reach out to me on social media or to find us on social media. And we share that story in several posts just because it's an incredible story to share. And they were great and wonderful people to work with. But I wanted to highlight that because it was a fan who loved a product, had playful banter with the product. A plan was concocted to recognize this fan. It fulfilled some dreams for the fan, and then word of mouth spread and new tasters were born. We've had so many people that reached out and said, where can I get, I've never heard of PST, can I try it, where can I get it? And Albertville had a hard time getting PST for a little bit, but it's restocked and there's a lot in my garage. So, but anyway, it's a fun, neat campaign to see how they were true to their brand in this grassroots marketing effort, and they chose a way to do that in a way that was true to them. Okay, so in conclusion, telling a brand story is like writing an essay. Now, for many of you, that may have just tuned you out because you may have hated English in school and you may have hated the concept of writing an essay. For me, I loved words and I still love words. And so I see building a brand as like writing an essay. You've got to introduce yourself. We talked about this in the beginning. You've got to define the brand. What is it? You've got to get your name out there. And then you're going to define it even more detail. Then you're going to develop it so that you really know how you want people to engage with you, how you want your customers to connect with you, what vision you want them to have of you. And then you've got to figure out how to disseminate it. You've got to spread the word of that brand that you're building. So in conclusion, you hope that they see the value of your brand and want to do business with you. And in conclusion, for me, I hope you see the value of branding and that it's more than just creating a logo. And it is my passion and what we've built an agency around just because we love it and it's fun. So everything I've shared with you, even though we've taken about 40 minutes or so, everything I've shared with you is really the pin tip of an iceberg of all of the story that can be written about the brand. And so if you have more questions and thoughts, we would love to engage with you on that. And I think that Will is going to open it up if there are any questions at the moment. And if you miss your opportunity now and you're watching this later or whatever, feel free to reach out to us. We'll be glad to answer any questions for you. Will's behind the scenes with some tech. Okay. So you can, if you want to reach out to us, our phone number is 256-849-0885. And our website is BAP-agency.com. And I think Will said he's putting that in the chat. And we'll be glad to talk to you just to answer questions. We love to talk about branding. And as I told you in the beginning, I love people. So don't ever be afraid to reach out and give us a call or message us. Of course, we're on Instagram and Facebook as well.
BethAnn, thank you so much. If you have any questions from our online audience, I know we have a few folks online. Kathy or Jeff, if you guys have any questions or comments, we'd love to hear those. If you want to unmute yourself or put those in the chat. Dale, do you have any questions or anything, comment?
Thank you.
I don't see any questions or comments from our online attendees.
Okay.
I'll go ahead and turn off the recording for us really quick.